At 9:41 p.m., the camera that was supposed to be offline recorded a man who could destroy her life. The footage was never meant to be seen. It was redirected, buried, forgotten. And the man standing over the body that night, he was not the one sitting in prison for murder. By the time the truth surfaced, a prosecutor was dead, a city councilman was in handcuffs, and an innocent man had already lost 18 months of his life. But here's what made this case dangerous. The man in prison wasn't framed by a stranger. He was framed by power. And the woman who exposed it received a message the night it all went public. You won the battle. Now let's see how long you survived the war. This wasn't just a murder case. It was a love story that should have ended in a courtroom. It didn't. Let's rewind. The night Daniel Cross was convicted, the courtroom felt wrong. Not quiet, wrong. The jury avoided his eyes. The prosecutor smiled too easily, and the judge read the sentence like he was reciting grocery items. Life imprisonment, no possibility of parole for 25 years. 25 years. Daniel didn't cry. He turned. He searched the crowd. And when he found her, he didn't look scared. He looked apologetic, like he had failed her. Emily gripped the wooden bench so tightly her knuckles turned white, because she knew something no one else in that courtroom seemed to care about. Daniel didn't kill Marcus Vale. He couldn't have. He was with her. Let's rewind. Marcus Vale was powerful, rich, connected, untouchable. A real estate developer who owned half the waterfront and most of the city council. He had enemies, dozens, but the police focused on one man, Daniel Cross, a high school history teacher, soft-spoken, idealistic, and recently involved in a public dispute with Marcus over a community housing project Marcus wanted demolished. Daniel had spoken at a town hall. He'd said, "Power without conscience is violence." The clip went viral locally. Marcus threatened to sue him for defamation. 3 weeks later, Marcus was found dead in his office. Blunt force trauma. Security cameras in the building? Offline. The night guard? On break. And Daniel's fingerprints were on a whiskey glass inside Marcus's office. Case closed. At least that's how they presented it. But here's what they didn't emphasize. Daniel had been invited to that office. Marcus called him. Emily saw the call log herself. Daniel went there at 6:12 p.m. He left at 6:47 p.m. Marcus's estimated time of death? Between 8 and 10 p.m. 2 hours later. The prosecution said the time window was approximate, convenient. They claimed Daniel returned. There was no footage of that, no witnesses, just theory and fingerprints. But here's the thing about fingerprints. They don't tell you when someone touched something, only that they did. And Daniel admitted it. "I had a drink," he told detectives. He wanted to talk. About what? He wanted me to withdraw my public opposition. Did he threaten you? No. The jury didn't like that answer. They wanted rage. They wanted motive. And the prosecutor gave it to them. She was humiliated publicly, she argued. He lost face. He lost power. And that kind of man retaliates. But Daniel wasn't that kind of man. Emily knew that, because she loved him. And love, when it's real, has a strange power. It notices what others miss. If you believe love can survive injustice, subscribe now, because this story only gets deeper. The trial lasted 9 days. 9 for a man's life. The murder weapon? A bronze statue from Marcus's office. No fingerprints, no DNA. But the prosecution didn't need it. They had something stronger. A witness. A woman named Carla Jennings. She claimed she saw Daniel re-enter the building around 9:15 p.m. from across the street, in the rain, through tinted glass. Emily felt her stomach drop when Carla pointed at Daniel in court. That's him. But here's what the jury never heard. Carla had pending fraud charges that quietly disappeared 2 weeks after her testimony. Emily found that out 3 months later, by accident. She wasn't a lawyer. She wasn't even political. She was a children's book illustrator. But something shifted inside her after the sentencing. Grief turned into fire. She started requesting transcripts, reading court documents, studying evidence, at night, alone. Because every time she closed her eyes, she saw Daniel's face when the sentence was read. Not fear, apology. Then she found it. A line buried in the forensic report. Marcus's watch had stopped at 9:42 p.m., cracked during impact. The coroner estimated death between 8 and 10 p.m., but if the watch broke at 9:42, that narrows things. Carla claimed she saw Daniel at 9:15 p.m., but Daniel's phone pinged a cell tower 18 miles away at 9:28 p.m. The defense mentioned it briefly. The prosecution said cell data can be unreliable. The jury shrugged, but Emily didn't. She drove the route herself, at night, in the rain. It took 26 minutes, minimum. There was no way Daniel could have been at Marcus's office at 9:15 and 18 miles away at 9:28. No way. Unless he could teleport. That's when she noticed something else. Marcus had transferred $200,000 the day before his death to an offshore account. Not unusual for a man like him, except the recipient name was encrypted. Emily hired a private investigator. She drained her savings, sold her car, moved into a smaller apartment, because proving innocence isn't romantic. It's exhausting. It's lonely. It costs everything. The investigator called her one evening, voice low. I traced the account. It's linked to a shell company, owned by Carla Jennings, the witness. The only witness placing Daniel at the scene. Emily's hands started shaking. Because now this wasn't just doubt, it was corruption. Carla testified Daniel returned at 9:15 p.m. Marcus's watch broke at 9:42 p.m. Carla received $200,000 the day before the murder, and her fraud charges vanished after the trial. But here's the twist. It gets worse. The offshore account wasn't funded by Marcus. It was funded by someone else. Someone who transferred money into Marcus's account first, then moved it out, like a funnel. Emily traced the incoming transfer, and the name nearly made her drop the phone. Assistant District Attorney Laura Bennett, the same prosecutor who argued Daniel's motive, the same woman who looked at the jury and said, "Justice demands accountability." Emily stared at the screen, heart pounding, because this meant one of two things. Either the prosecutor was involved, or someone was framing her too. And Daniel was just collateral damage, a convenient villain, a teacher who spoke too loudly about power. Emily requested prison visitation the next morning. Daniel looked thinner, but his eyes were steady. "I found something," she whispered through the glass. He studied her face. "You look tired." "I'm not stopping." He smiled softly. "I know." When she told him about the money trail, his expression changed. Not relief, recognition. "I met her once," he said quietly. "Who?" "Laura Bennett, 2 days before Marcus died." Emily froze. "Why?" "She came to my school, asked questions about the housing protest, said she was just gathering context." "Did you tell your lawyer?" "They said it was irrelevant." Irrelevant. The prosecutor met privately with the man she would later accuse of murder 2 days before the victim died, and no one thought that mattered. Emily left the prison with one realization. This was bigger than Daniel. Marcus had power, Laura had ambition, Carla had debt, and somewhere inside that triangle was the truth that should have ended in a life sentence, but didn't. Because that night, as Emily sat at her kitchen table reviewing bank statements, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated. Answered. A distorted voice spoke slowly. Stop digging. Her blood ran cold. You don't understand what you're touching. Click. The line went dead. She looked around her apartment. Lights off, curtains drawn, silence heavy. Then her laptop screen flickered. An email notification appeared. No sender, no subject, just one attachment. A video file. Timestamped. The night Marcus died, 9:41 p.m. 1 minute before the watch stopped. Emily's finger hovered over the trackpad, heart racing. Because if this video showed Daniel, everything would collapse. But if it didn't, everything would explode. She clicked, and the screen filled with grainy footage from inside Marcus's office. The camera wasn't offline, it had been redirected. And the man standing over Marcus at 9:41 p.m. was not Daniel. It was someone Emily recognized, someone powerful. Someone who should never have been there. The screen froze, the image glitched, and then the video cut to black. This was the story that should have ended with a life sentence, but didn't. Because in that frozen frame, Emily saw the face of a man who could destroy her or free Daniel, and he had no idea she'd just seen him. The video cut to black. But not before Emily saw his face, clear enough, close enough, powerful enough to end her life without ever touching her. City Councilman Richard Hale, Marcus Vale's closest political ally, the man who stood beside the prosecutor at press conferences, the man who called Daniel Cross a radical threat to progress. And at 9:41 p.m., he was standing over Marcus's body. Emily replayed the clip 10 times. Freeze, zoom, enhance. There was no mistake. Hale's signet ring flashed under the desk lamp. The same ring he wore in every public photo. Her hands trembled. Because this wasn't corruption. This was orchestration. Marcus dies. Daniel gets blamed. A vocal opponent disappears, and Hale steps in to absorb Marcus's unfinished developments. Power shifts, clean, efficient, permanent. Unless someone exposes it. If you believe truth always fights back, subscribe now because what happened next changed everything. Emily didn't call the police. She wasn't naive anymore. The prosecutor was connected, the witness was paid, and now a councilman was on video at the crime scene. She made 3 copies of the file, one on a flash drive, one encrypted in cloud storage, one sent anonymously to an investigative journalist she'd been quietly following for months. Then she heard it. A knock. Slow, deliberate. 10:27 p.m. Her heart nearly stopped. Another knock. Miss Harper, this is the police. Her blood turned to ice. She hadn't called them. She hid the flash drive inside a hollowed-out art supply box, opened the door 2 inches. 2 officers stood outside. Polite. Too polite. We received a tip you may have accessed restricted court materials. I requested public transcripts. They exchanged a glance. We'll need you to come with us. For what? Questioning. She knew what this was. Intimidation. They wanted to know how much she knew and who else knew it. At the station, they separated her from her phone, from her laptop, from everything. A detective leaned forward across the metal table. You need to stop. Stop what? Digging into things that are settled. Settled? She whispered. An innocent man is in prison. He didn't blink. Daniel Cross was convicted by a jury, and juries can be wrong. Silence. Then he said something that made her stomach drop. You're not the first person to question this case. What does that mean? He didn't answer. He stood.
left her alone in the room for 43 minutes. 43 minutes to think, to doubt, to fear. But here's what they didn't know. The video had already been sent.
But here's what no one was prepared for. The footage wasn't just explosive. It connected threads that ran far deeper than Daniel's conviction. At 2:13 a.m., her phone buzzed after they released her. Unknown number. Again. But this time, a message. "We need to meet. I've seen it." The journalist. They agreed to meet at sunrise. Public place, crowded cafe. Emily barely slept. Every sound felt like a threat. Every passing car felt like surveillance. But at 7:02 a.m., she slid into a booth across from Jonah Mercer, Pulitzer-nominated investigative reporter. He didn't waste time. "I verified the metadata." Her breath caught. "And? It's authentic." Her pulse pounded. No signs of tampering. Timestamp aligns with forensic estimates. She closed her eyes for 1 second. Relief flooded in. But Jonah wasn't smiling. "There's more." He turned his laptop toward her. Financial records, campaign donations, shell corporations. Richard Hale had been funneling city development funds through Marcus's projects for years. Money laundering, kickbacks, and Daniel's public opposition threatened to expose the whole structure. "So they framed him," she whispered. Jonah nodded slowly. "Looks that way. But why kill Marcus?" Jonah leaned back. Because Marcus was about to flip. Emily's heart skipped. What? 2 days before his death, he contacted federal investigators. Her mind raced. The prosecutor? Laura Bennett? She was under review for misconduct 6 months before the trial. Emily felt the room tilt. This wasn't just a frame job, it was damage control. Marcus was becoming a liability. Daniel was convenient, and Hale needed both problems erased. By noon, Jonah's editor approved the story. It would go live at 6 p.m. Video evidence included. Financial records attached. Public. Irreversible. Emily sat in her apartment staring at the clock. 59:59 p.m. Her phone rang. Daniel. Prison line. "I heard something's happening," he said softly. "How?" Guards are nervous. She swallowed tears. "It's going public." Silence. Then, "Em, if this puts you in danger." "I already am." A pause. Then he said the words that broke her. "I never stopped loving you." Her voice cracked. "I know." 6 p.m. The article went live. Within minutes, shares, comments, outrage. By 6:07 p.m., national outlets picked it up. By 6:12 p.m., #FreeDanielCross was trending. By 6:20 p.m., the mayor announced an emergency press conference. And at 6:34 p.m., police vehicles surrounded City Hall. Live on television. Richard Hale escorted out in handcuffs. Expression blank. Ring still on his finger. Emily collapsed onto her couch. Crying. Laughing. Shaking. It was working. It was finally working. But justice is never simple. At 8:02 p.m., another headline dropped. Assistant District Attorney Laura Bennett found dead in her home. Apparent suicide. Emily stared at the screen. No note released, no details confirmed. Just one sentence from authorities. No evidence of foul play. Her stomach twisted. Because Laura Bennett was many things. Ambitious, corrupt, complicit. But she was also careful, calculated. And people who protect powerful men don't usually end themselves the same night those men fall. They get silenced. The next morning, Daniel's conviction was officially vacated. Emergency hearing. Judge cited newly discovered exculpatory evidence. After 18 months behind bars, Daniel walked free. The prison gates opened.
He stepped into the sunlight, and for the first time since sentencing, he didn't look apologetic. He looked alive. Emily ran to him. No cameras mattered, no microphones, just two people who refused to let love die inside a lie. He held her like he was afraid she'd disappear. "You did it," he whispered. "No," she said softly. "We did." But as they stood there, celebrated, freed, a black SUV idled across the street. Tinted windows, engine running, watching. Emily noticed. Daniel noticed. The vehicle didn't move, didn't blink, just waited. Because Richard Hale was arrested, Laura Bennett was dead, but Marcus Vale's network, the money, the connections, the silent partners who never appeared on camera, they were still out there. And powerful systems don't collapse quietly. They retaliate. This was the story that should have ended with a conviction, but didn't. It was the story that should have ended with an arrest, but didn't. Because justice isn't a moment, it's a war. Daniel was free, but someone had just lost millions, and powerful people don't forgive losses. As Emily squeezed Daniel's hand, her phone buzzed one last time. Unknown number. A single message. "You won the battle. Now let's see how long you survive the war." She looked up. The SUV finally pulled away. Slow, unhurried, like it knew something she didn't. And for the first time since the gates opened, freedom didn't feel safe. It felt temporary. And that is how their story truly ended. Not with a sentence, not with a verdict, but with a warning. Because sometimes proving innocence is only the beginning. If you believe love was the only reason this case was reopened, would Daniel still be in prison without Emily? If you believe this story proves something bigger about corruption, what lesson should we all take from it? If you believe stories like this deserve to be told, drop your thoughts in the comments right now. Comment your theory. I read them all. Share this video with someone who believes in justice, and subscribe to this channel for more chilling true crime stories about love, power, and the cases that should have ended, but didn't.